Front Desk, Chapter 3. Sign here on the dotted line, Mr. Yao said to my parents, presenting him with an enormous employment contract, 6 pages long. My parents beamed as they proudly signed their names. Mr. Yao took the signed employment contract and stuffed it into his bag. Thank you so much, Mr. Yao, for giving us this opportunity, my father said. You don't know how much it means to us. He got choked up as he said the words. We promise we'll take good care of your motel, my mom asked. We won't let you down. Mr. Yao nodded and held up the manager's keys to the motel. As my parents reached for the keys, he held them just out of reach. Everything that happens in this motel is your responsibility, you understand? He asked. Something breaks, you have to pay for it. My parents nodded. Under no circumstances are you ever to leave the motel unattended, ever. One of you must always stay behind. Again, my parents nodded eagerly, even though I was thinking, wait, what? I can't go out with both my parents at the same time? But what about Disneyland? But it was condition number 3 that really made my jaw drop. Mr. Yao turned to me. You can't use the pool, kid, he said. Why not? I asked. If you use the pool, then all the customers will want to use the pool. So think of all the water and towels they'll be wasting, he said. It's not good for the environment. I frowned at him. Somehow I doubted this was about the environment. She understands. She won't use the pool, will you, Mia? My mother shook her head at me. I glanced at my mom at the desperation in her eyes. Okay, I said. Good, Mr. Yao grinned, satisfied. He tossed my parents the keys. That night, the sweet smells of jasmine tea filled the front office. My parents only ever got the jasmine tea out for special occasions. We had packed a small tin of it before we left China, and every time something good happened, my mom would take out a few leaves and make some tea. I guess not a lot of good things had happened because there was still quite a lot left. But all that was about to change. Tonight, my parents poured generously from the tin. The calming aroma brought me back to my grandmother's house. All of us crowded around the table. All these big family dinners, my cousin Shen and I would always giggle and interrupt each other as we talked. I felt an ache in my tummy, razor sharp at the thought of Shen. I still remember the day I left. I could see Shen's face pressed up against the glass by the security gate at the airport, blinking furiously like he was trying hard not to cry. I was too. On the plane ride over, they gave us little packets of butter for our bread. Butter was very expensive in China, so I asked for extras and put them in my pocket. I saved them for Shen for months in the fridge until it finally sank in that we weren't going back. So I ate them. My mother's voice jerked me back to reality. Hey, Mia, look here, look at me, she said, smiling. Huh? I asked. I looked up to see my mother crouching in front of the front desk, holding her hands up like she was going to take a picture. It's this thing she does. My mom says it's important to take pictures of the nice moments in life, even if it's just in your head. As my mom pressed down on her pretend camera, my dad and I sat up straight and gave her our best smiles. Eggplant, she said in Chinese, and I giggled. Because even though that's what people in China said whenever someone took pictures, it was funny hearing it in America. As my parents unpacked, I slipped out the back to find Hank. I brought him a cup of jasmine tea. Now that we were making $150 a day, surely we could afford to buy some more. I had seen a Chinese supermarket on the way over here. Hank's room was in the back beside the laundry room. There was a pot of cherry tomato plants in front of his room. I knocked on the door. Hank answered on the first knock. His eyebrows shot up when he saw the tea. That's for me? He exclaimed. I smiled and handed it to him. It's from China, I told him. Get out of here. The guy next door opened his door to see what was going on. He was a white guy about the same age as Hank. He wore a Hawaiian shirt, and he had a small tattoo of a sailboat on his arm. The smell of popcorn drifted from his room. "Billy Bob," Hank said. "Meet Mia. She's the new manager. And look, she brought me some tea from China." "Good to meet you, Mia," Billy Bob said, extending a hand. I shook it. "Pleasure's all mine," I said. Billy Bob smiled. "Say, you're a lot nicer than the old manager." "The last manager treated us like second-class citizens," Hank added. "Really?" I asked. Hank nodded. Carefully, he lifted the cup to his lips and took a sip. "Oh, this stuff is good." Hank turned to Billy Bob. "You've got to try this." More doors opened, and soon all the weeklies were outside, talking and sipping the tea under the glowing crescent. Like Billy Bob, they were white too. Mrs. Q had long, wavy hair that ran all the way down her back. Fred had a big belly that shook when he laughed. And Mrs. T had glittery cat-eye reading glasses, which she wore on the tip of her nose. Hank was right. They were all very nice. The weeklies asked if I wanted to join them for a game of Monopoly, but it was getting late and I needed to help my parents unpack. I bid them all good night and was about to go back to the manager's quarters when I suddenly remembered. "Hey, Hank, what do you mean by what you said earlier about Mr. Yao?" I asked. "That he was anything but all right?" Hank's jaw locked. "You'll soon find out, kid," Hank said. "The man has coal for a heart." Chapter 4. Hank's words thrashed around inside me. Mr. Yao was strict, sure, maybe even a little dramatic, but coal for his heart? Hank couldn't possibly be right. This was the man who trusted us with his motel, was letting us live here for free, and was paying us $150 a day. The first thing the next day, I intended on setting Hank straight, but when morning came, my mother had other plans. "Let's go see your new school today," she announced. I groaned. Another grade, another year as the new girl. When you moved as much as I have, checking out schools is like checking out shoe polish. So far, I'd gone to 4 different schools for 5 different grades. Dell Elementary School was about 5 blocks east from the motel and a lot bigger than my old school. It was late August, so classes didn't start for a couple of days. As my mom and I walked across the big empty parking lot, I wondered what kind of kids went there. Nice kids, I hoped. We pushed open the door to the office, and the receptionist, a blonde lady with big curls that bounced as she moved her head, looked very surprised to see us. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hi, I want to sign my daughter up for school. We just moved here," my mom said. The receptionist looked me up and down. I wiggled in my tattered pants and my big old t-shirt from Goodwill. "I see," she said. She pushed a button on her desk phone and said, "Principal Evans, we have a new student here to see you." Principal Evans wore a blazer even though it was 90 degrees outside. She looked like what my mother calls a powerful white lady. She insisted on taking us on a tour of the school even though my mom said we didn't need a tour. I could tell she was anxious to get back to the motel. "It'll only take 10 minutes, Principal Evans said, leading us toward the gymnasium in her clickety-clackety black pumps. "So Mia, tell me about yourself." I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, my mom blurted out, "She just moved here from China." Huh? Why does she always have to tell people that? It wasn't even true. We'd been here for 2 years. Of course, as soon as my mother said the words, Principal Evans started talking to me like I was a turkey. "Really? Wow. Howdy do you like this country?" she asked. "I really like it," I answered quickly. Principal Evans put her hand on her chest and exhaled in relief. You know English. Oh, that's great. I have to admit, we don't get too many Chinese kids here. There's only one other Chinese kid in fifth grade. She smiled at me and added, I'm sure he'll be thrilled you're here. On the way home, my mom and I played our usual game, looking at big American houses and trying to figure out who lived inside. A family with two girls, my mom said, pointing to the pink curtains upstairs. And a cat, I said. There was a little door in the front door. I turned to my mom. Hey, why did you have to tell the principal I just got here from China? So she'd cut you some slack. I stopped peering into the houses and peered into my mom. And peered into my mom. What do you mean? You heard what she said. There were only two Chinese kids in your grade. So? So it probably means most of the other kids are white. So? So they'll be way better than you in English, my mom said matter-of-factly. I looked at the ground. Not necessarily, I said. I might not speak native English like Jason, but my English was a lot better than when I first came, I think. Plus, I liked English. I liked how you could say a train of thought or a blanket of snow, which you couldn't in Chinese. But it didn't matter how much I liked English. My mom had already decided. Necessarily, she said.